Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Is it okay if I fire you? This is a story of MC that a previous boss had done, but involved me directly as will be explained. Time frame is early 2000s for reference. In my late high school, early college years, I had a job doing telemarketing work during winter and summer breaks. While it was boiler room cold calling, we primarily were soliciting donations for agencies that had contracted us to do the work, so felt less scuzzy. Think police departments, fire departments, etc. We kept a portion of donations for operating expenses. Everything over a certain threshold went directly to the receiving party. Everybody wins. I enjoyed the job as the scripts were simple. I was allowed to read a book and such between calls, and a number of my friends were also employed there so we could hang out during lunch breaks. The pay was a decent chunk above minimum wage at that time, so it was a good gig. I also had a knack for it, and at one point was fifth in sales across all their sites they had in operation, second in our building. One summer, while driving to work, my car promptly dies with no warning and I'm left stranded on the road. As you do in this situation back before cell phones for poor college students were a thing, I walk to the nearest house and ask to use the phone. I call my dad who starts driving to get me, and call my work to let them know I'll be late. My boss says fine and that he will chat with me when I get in. Father shows up with my mother in 2 cars. I take the extra and he begins the arduous process of towing my car back to the house. This involved tying a rope to the front of the car and to the back of his vehicle and crawling back home so he could fix it himself. I've been in that back car, and did not envy my father being in the back car with only 10 feet of space between him and the car my mother was driving, but I'm off to work. I arrive to work, clock in almost an hour after the start of my shift, and am promptly told by the front receptionist that my boss would like to see me in his office. So I head on back. Beginning details completed. Cue the start of the MC story. My boss and I have always had a good rapport. I'm a good worker, get good reviews, and he and I have some similar interests outside of work we can chat about occasionally. When I arrive in his office, he's shuffling some papers around and has laid out a few documents facing me. As close as I can recall, this is the conversation that followed. Boss. Hope everything worked out with the car, glad to have you here. Couple things I need to discuss with you. First of all, as I'm sure you are aware, being more than 30 minutes late to work is considered a Class C violation. 3 classes, from C to A, C being the least egregious, if insufficient time is given prior to the occurrence. This is your first violation, so I'd like to talk to you about what happens next. I'm sweating at this point. I've never even been talked to about being out of order on anything while working here, and getting my first violation scared the heck out of me. So I'm sitting there, white-faced, and he continues. Boss. No official write-up or anything occurs for a first violation, or even the first few Class C violations, but it is manager's discretion on the punishment depending on past behaviors. Now, you are a good employee and I've put into corporate a few times to give you a raise, but because you only work during your school breaks, it is denied as you aren't considered full-time. So the papers I have here are your termination papers and an offer letter I'd like to extend to you to hire you back on again. So, in short, before I file these, I'd like to ask. Is it okay if I fire you? So we go through the process of him firing me, which then allowed him to extend an offer to me to rehire me at roughly a 25% increase in pay, since he could justify to corporate the bump as he was hiring someone with experience. In talking with him, he let me know it was something he occasionally did to the high school and college workers to get around the corporate's policy of not allowing raises to people that didn't work 1,000 plus hours in a year. It was his own way of being maliciously compliant with a policy that didn't allow him to reward some people that he thought deserved it. He had been apparently waiting for me to do something that he could technically fire me for. The way their back-end systems worked, it wouldn't even show up as a break in service, since the firing and hiring happened on the same day, and since I never worked more than the minimum 1,000 hours each year, I didn't have any tenure or anything to be worried about losing. The laugh he and the receptionist had when he walked me back to the front to introduce her to the new employee was enjoyable, and I've had a fun story to tell ever since. Next one is titled, "Can't leave before the end of my notice period?" No problem. Last month, my manager drops a bombshell. The company has decided to scrap the big project that my team been working on for the past 2 years. We must wrap up everything and, starting from June, we will all be moved to different teams. Now, I'm a data analyst, and the company doesn't have any open projects that require a data analyst. So they looked at my profile, saw I had some basic knowledge of programming, and decided to move me to the dev team. Both me and the dev team think it's an insane idea, because I will need lots of training before I become useful, and I don't even want to be a full-time dev. But upper management hasn't bothered to ask for our opinion before making all the arrangements. I immediately start looking for a new job, and as luck would have it, there is an extremely high request for data analysts in my area. Within a few weeks I have an offer in hand and I give my notice. My contract, I'm in the EU, is very strict regarding notice periods. A resigning employee must give 2 months' notice. This is entirely for the benefit of the company that will need to find a replacement. The same applies when a company fires an employee, they must give the employee 2 months' notice. However, it's possible to shorten the notice period by mutual agreement. So when I sit down with my manager and HR, I tell them I'd like to give only 2 weeks notice and leave at the end of May. I tell them that I've already started wrapping up my activities before my move to the dev team, and I don't have any ongoing projects that I need to transfer to my colleagues, so 2 weeks would be more than enough to finish documenting everything. They say absolutely no, I have to stay here for the entire 2 months period. Which is fine by me. My new job doesn't start until August and I don't mind being paid in the meantime. The only reason I suggested shortening the notice period was because I thought I was doing the company a favor. I thought I'd be stealing their paycheck if I stayed for 2 months even though I don't have anything left to do. But since they pretty much told me I was being unprofessional, or that I was trying to cut and run, okay, I'll take their money in exchange for sitting around doing nothing for a few more weeks. You may think, but Renticle, they're going to find some boring task for you. Well, they can certainly try, but the projects they're working on are so different from what I do that I'm pretty much useless to them. For example, someone will ask, "Can you do XYZ?" And I will honestly answer, "I've no idea what a XYZ even is, but I will be happy to help if you teach me." At that point, they'll say it would take too long and it's not worth it to train me since I'm leaving soon. So, my working days now go like this. I show up at 9 a.m. sharp and go to my office, where I'm the only person since the others were moved to different teams. I have a leisurely second breakfast, check my email, then I send a message to our Teams group letting them know that I'm free and to ask me if they need help with anything. Then I remote into my home PC and play until lunchtime. I have lunch, coffee, I chat with my coworkers, they're quite nice, it's too bad that upper management is crazy, I'm going to miss them. In the afternoon I usually check Reddit, I chat with my friends if they're online, play a bit more, and I'm out of the door at 5 p.m. By the way, they would like for me to vacate the office so they can use it as a meeting room, but they can't until I leave. There are no empty desks anywhere. The dev team already hired someone else and has no space, so tough luck. Next one is titled, "You want me to park it? Okay." I was a valet at a hospital for several years, and the parking lot we had to use was 0.22 miles away from our valet station. I loved being outside, it was fantastic for my 40-year-old woman physique and my colleague, and I got along really well at the time. He was Latino and would bring amazing food sometimes. We parked everyone, employees, patients, visitors, and soon-to-be patients. We were confused for the emergency room many times, but that's a whole other sub. One afternoon, an older couple drives up in a brand new Lexus. Absolutely beautiful vehicle anyone would be happy to drive for any amount of time. As they pull up, they glide right by my colleague who was considerably closer, and stop in front of me, which put them farther away from the front entrance. Man gets out, hands me his keys and says, not quietly, "I'd rather he didn't park the car please." I stood there for a second. I guess I was waiting for him to say he was kidding and knew him. Nope, no. I take their vehicle to the lot, sick to my stomach. Coworker shrugs, tries to act like it didn't bother him, but obviously it does. I knew what I had to do. The old racist couple returns for their new racist car, and as I drive the route back to the front, I turn on the radio and go right to the local Mexican station. I turn the volume up, way up, and up some more, and turn off the radio. As I get out, I don't say a word to them, I don't look at them, make them chase the keys from my hand, and pretend they never existed. All I heard about it from leadership was a general announcement to leave radios alone. It wasn't a huge statement on behalf of my colleague. I knew he wouldn't want me fighting for him, but it was a little victory. A loud victory. Next one is titled, Trim the Hedges. Growing up was very interesting as my parents were divorced and I had ADHD, or whatever they're calling it this week. Not so much hyper, but definitely the ADD, and that led to a lot of malicious compliance on my part. Here's one. As a teenager, my parents were divorced, and money was an issue, so no allowance to do the things teenagers like to do. This also meant no car, no insurance, you get the idea. I watched some friends work minimum wage jobs and hated that idea. So instead I found a lawnmower and started mowing lawns. I lived in a middle-class neighborhood, so 5 to 6 lawns, $20 a pop, a weekend would give you some nice spending cash in the 90s. One customer, a few streets away, asked me to trim his hedges for him. I didn't know how or have the tools, but he did. He showed me what he expected and I made it happen. They looked great. He was so happy he gave me $100. In today's money that would be about $250. When I got home I excited told my mom what happened. My mom, as wonderful as she was, misunderstood life in general. In her mind, if you fixed a car issue, suddenly you were the car expert and knew everything about cars. Same thing with cooking, computers, audio, video and yard work. She proceeded to tell me to do the same for the bushes in front of our house. I tried to tell her I didn't have the tools and was only following his instructions. They weren't hedges, but she was adamant I do it, to the point she starts screaming at me. What would any 16-year-old teenager do? Go grab our replica samurai sword, sharp as all, and start to hack away at the bushes in front of our house. Now my neighbors knew my mom had unrealistic expectations from previous events, but even this was odd. One of our neighbors came over asking me in a heavy southern accent. Neighbor. What in the hell are you doing? Me. Cut someone's hedges, and mom suddenly thinks I know how to trim bushes. Neighbor. Ah, that again. Do you want to borrow some powered clippers? Me. Nope. I'm steaming mad at the moment. Mom, hearing the neighbor, comes out and sees her bushes partially mangled. Mom. What the hell are you doing? Me. Trimming the bushes, as I proceeded to whack a few more. Mom. I meant how you're supposed to. Me. Sure, whack. With what tools? Whack. I'm a genius, right? Whack. I trim someone's hedges, whack. So I must be able to magically trim bushes, whack. Mom looks befuddled as I continue to whack away using a replica samurai sword. Neighbor steps in, patting me on the back, and says, I think she got the message, as I turn to look at her with a shocked, befuddled look on her face. I took my shirt and cleaned the now dented blade and walked inside to go take a shower. I'd love to say this kind of behavior stopped, but it never did. She also never asked me to trim the bushes again. Next one is titled, We Must All Drink This Spirit You Shared With Us Now. Okay. This happened while I worked at a phone shop in the UK. The shop was a fruit name. Anyway, it was 2009 and I had just come back from a 3-week Spanish holiday and I had a sharing box of absinthe. It ranged from 87.5% to 98% alcohol. not proof but actual percent of alcohol. I had drunk the 98% stuff on holiday and got wasted on only 150 milliliters of the stuff. During a whole night, not all at once. Anyway, I replaced that bottle with OJ and planned to take it myself when I shared with all the staff in the shop. I get back to the UK on the Thursday, had Friday off and was in work on Saturday morning. Now I handed out the bottles, and before I could say do not drink this stuff until tonight, the boss snatched a bottle of 95% stuff, told everyone to do a toast and had us all down the entire bottle. As I tried to explain no, you will get drunk, he said it's his tradition wherever he worked to share these bottles and drink up when handed out. So we all did. Of the 8 staff in 7 were quickly laid up wasted and sick. All but one of them vomited it back up. Meanwhile, me with the bottle of OJ was manning the shop and making the best day's sales ever. I earned nearly £450 commission in one day. Boss tried to get me in trouble, but all the staff all said to the area manager that he insisted we all drank and overruled my warnings not to. He ended up getting fired a few months later for sleeping with a staff member. I left shortly afterwards to change to a job at Vodafone. Last one is titled, "You're Going to Hit That Mailbox." On our weekly trip home from her mother's house, my ex would drive down this residential street with a long curve to the right. The curve was about 12 houses long. Every week for 2 years on that curve there was one house's mailbox about in the middle where it seemed to stick out just a wee bit more than the rest. Now I was a professional driver and had been for a decade, so when I'm in the passenger seat and I say you're gonna hit that mailbox, the chances are pretty good that if I hadn't said anything, then that's exactly what was going to happen. I said this so often, every week, that I just shortened it to mailbox. Every time she would jerk the wheel and eventually she started screaming at me that I was going to make her wreck. I tried to reason with her. Sometimes that fails. So finally came the time when I was exhausted, from work, kids, wife, life and everything. I saw it coming but said nothing. She took out the passenger side mirror and we had to replace the mailbox. Did she learn anything? Who knows? But I learned that I no longer cared enough to try. So there's that. Thanks for listening.